We are delighted that you, students, faculty, staff, and community members of Northeast Florida have joined us this morning for a community town hall on AI in higher education, possibilities and perils. If you haven't yet had an opportunity to grab some coffee and breakfast refreshments, we invite you to do so. And to our virtual guests, we hope that you experience an equally engaging program. The advent of open generative AI in November 2022 has fundamentally altered many facets of our academic and professional lives. Nowadays, college students can enter a prompt in an AI engine such as ChatGPT, Claude, or Bard, and receive nearly instantaneous feedback. And sometimes, as our faculty will well attest, that comes in the form of a complete essay or even a research paper. Educators can receive assistance with writing curriculum maps, syllabi, and class lessons, as well as grading student assignments. And office professionals can receive assistance with data analysis, report writing, and software applications, to name but a few of the many possibilities. Indeed, this suite of possibilities in higher education seems infinite. Yet in the face of unanswered questions about data security, privacy protections, and academic integrity, the perils inherent in such a powerful tool may seem daunting. During this morning's town hall, we turn to the presidents of the colleges and universities throughout Northeast Florida for their insights into how their respective institutions are embracing the possibilities while addressing the perils regarding AI in higher education. We now share some brief logistical details, particularly for our in-person guests. In the event of a fire or another emergency, we will exit through your right or left, and please know that an FSCJ staff member will guide you to a safe assembly area outside the building. At the end of the panel discussion, both our in-person guests and our virtual ones will have an opportunity to ask questions of the presidents. And for those joining us virtually, Jill Johnson, Chief Communication Officer of FSCJ, will help to facilitate the Q&A component in the live stream. Following the program, we invite all participants, whether here with us in person or online, to visit the AI in Higher Education webpage so that you can read more about opportunities and learn a little bit further about our distinguished presidents through their bios. At this time, it is my privilege to introduce our faculty moderators. FSCJ Professor of Communication and Director of the Academy for Teaching and Learning, Dr. Audrey Ante, and FSCJ Professor of Humanities and member of the Academy for Teaching and Learning, Dr. Scott Kaysen. Our faculty will guide us through a panel discussion with the college and university presidents. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to them.
Thank you, Dr. Seesvold. It is our distinct honor to introduce our esteemed college and university presidents, including Dr. John Avendano, President of Florida State College at Jacksonville. Yay.
Mr. Tim Cost, President of Jacksonville University.
Dr. Moez Lamayam, President of the University of North Florida,
Mr. Joe Pickens, President of St. John's River State College.
And we are going to begin our questions with question one for all of our panelists. We'll start with Dr. Avendano and just go right down the row if you all are comfortable with that. And our first question is, how has your view about AI in higher education evolved since the advent of generative AI in November 2022? It's a two-parter, I'm sorry. And what is your long-term vision for the integration of AI at your institution?
Thank you, Professor Ante. I want to first begin. I'll come to those questions if I don't forget them in the process. I want to thank all of you for joining us this morning. I really do appreciate such a great turnout. I really do. Appreciate all of you finding some time. And for those who are out online, virtually, thank you also for joining us this morning. I would also be remiss if I didn't extend my deep appreciation for my colleagues who are here with me on the panel, and all of whom I really truly call my friends. I greatly appreciate their friendship, their in many cases their mentorship, their partnership in many respects. And so thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this morning. I really thought that the fact that the Atlantic Drive-In was all backed up because of the four of us, or the Beatles were in town. But obviously there was a lot of traffic patterns which hindered our ability to be here today. So anyway, back to the question. So, what was my first thought about AI, and then, how has it evolved in my time since November of 2022? And it was really, at first it was like, this is really kind of a cool thing, right? You start to think the application of where it has really benefited, at least for me, in the things that I do in my day-to-day life. I thought, it was just amazing to me. And then as you start to learn more and hear more and unfortunately experience more of what AI can also do if it's in the wrong hands. I went from, oh my, to, oh my, right? And I'll go through some of the examples, but it really, the genie is out of the bottle right now. And so it just depends on whether we're going to get, Jafar or Robin Williams as we go forward. But it really does come down to how people will utilize artificial intelligence. So to me, I always try to think about what are the possibilities of this, right? I like to try to think of how can the college and universities and students and our faculty and everyone who will be experiencing this, at least at the higher education level, how can we benefit from that, right? So those are the types of things that I think we need to kind of prepare. I'll put this caution out there. So anybody on Snapchat? Nobody's on Snapchat? One. All right, great. For two of you, I shared it with a couple of people yesterday. So if you're on Snapchat and or probably some of the other social media connecting things, this came up on mine. So I thought, I have a little avatar out there, and I was going to play with it a little bit this past week. And this was the message that generative AI technology is designed with safety in mind, but may give responses based on biased, incorrect, harmful, and misleading information. Don't rely on its advice, right? So, that's what AI is telling us about itself. And I think that's really where we have to approach it, right? So there are tremendous capabilities of what AI can do, but there's also tremendous things that people can use it for negative things. I'll stop there. As time goes on, maybe I'll just share it at some point. Some of the examples that I have found where AI has been used or can be used for positive illustrations. In the same token, some of the things that has been used already for negative things. So,
thank you.
Thanks, John. And good morning, everybody. Tim Cost at Jacksonville University. First, let me thank our friend, President Avendano, for hosting. We did one of these a couple of years ago on COVID. I think it was a pretty rousing discussion. We were trying to do things that were dealing with, obviously, a massive threatening public health issue. And you may think the same thing about what we're talking about today, but but I don't think we do up here. So I also want to thank Audrey and Scott, Kathleen and Jill. We are all friends, by the way. And if you throw in the folks at Flagler and the folks at Kaiser and the folks at Edward Waters, we meet all the time. We see each other. I know it's weird to see us out in the wild that we might be friends. But the educational ecosystem of Jacksonville needs us to work together. And we don't do it well enough yet. And we've all been around a long time. And we can do better. And at the end, I'll give you my early call. This may be the subject maybe we can all finally come together on. We've struggled to do it on water. We've struggled to do it on healthcare and military. So maybe we can figure it out here. Let me quickly answer the question that was posed. And thanks to all of you for coming. When it first came, November 30th, 2022, some of you may know I was 32 years in business. Where you make risk-adjusted decisions all the time is very different than higher education. Couldn't be more different, especially the companies I was at. And my first reaction to it, I got a call the next day from my son in Seattle who's at Amazon. And he said, have you seen this? You got to look at it because you go to all the ways you go to things. And my first reaction was, this is an unbelievably huge positive disruption in the world. And then I remembered I was the president of a university. Honestly, my first reaction was as a business person. And I said, this is how this happens. This is what happens when we first heard about what was a cyber threat. And then we created cybersecurity, and then we created cyber ranges. What did we all first think when we heard www.something with an ampersand? Depended on where you were and what you were doing at the time. But if you were in business, every one of these is a chance to kind of disintermediate, drop pieces of the supply chain, change. At universities, and I want to give a shout out here right away, our deans have been unbelievable on this, and our faculty have been spectacular because they pivoted from where, if you remember, the New York State K through 12 board immediately ruled to keep this away. Okay, that was before Christmas of 2022. That's how fast they moved. But for our faculty, and maybe it's the same for these gentlemen here, to pivot as quickly as they did to, you're not going to stop innovation. You're not going to shut it down. How do we harness it? How do we unleash it? How do we bring it in? So if you ask the tough part of the question, I'll hand it off. Your long-term vision first, how do we, with the help of the faculty and their leadership, bring it into the classroom? How do we integrate it into what we're doing? Two, how do we create a pathway for Jacksonville University students to build a field of study around it? Third, how do they see a career in it? Because we're all hitting a moving target. You tell me what the AI jobs 5 years from now are going to look at. I guarantee you're wrong. So am I. Okay, so we're spending a lot of time. We're going to talk about two areas where I think we have a unique point of view at our university. One is law and one is medicine. And there are going to be profound impacts in those two areas, and they're already occurring. After their careers, the last thing I would add is the role that AI can play in the business side of a university. What can you do like a corporation would do? What can you do with the routinized, repetitive things that AI may be able to pull your costs down a little bit on? It's great to be here. Thanks. I get to hand it off. One way to keep presidents online, have one mic for 4 people. So the world famous Moez Lamam.
Thank you, Tim. Good morning. Let me extend my thanks to my really good friend, Dr. John Avendano, for organizing this and hosting us. John and Tim are among the very first friends I've made here in Jacksonville, and the rest is history. So nice to be here. However, when John told me about this idea, I was very reluctant for one reason. I don't like morning. It reminds me of a very bad memory. When I was a doctoral student, University of Minnesota, teaching my very first lecture, 8 a.m., an auditorium of about 400 people teaching data analysis. You see the scene. After a few weeks, I noticed that one student at the end of at the back always sleeps. So first week, you let go, then you feel your ego touched. So went back and asked his colleague sitting next to him, said, could you please wake him up? He looked at me and said, no. I said, why not? He said, you put him to sleep, you wake him up. So please don't sleep. Now back to the question. Back to the questions. Let me ask you a question. Who among all of you and our friends online have used Watson, IBM Watson? Have you used it? No one. Very expected. Well, you see, probably one person. AI was here before, years ago. But what made a difference is now it is accessible. It is easy to use. It is free. It's user-friendly. And that's really what is making a difference. AI has existed for decades, but as a concept, as a theory, as research matter. So like any innovations, it goes through several phases. The first one is excitement. Early adopters, the geeks, will jump and will think this will solve all the problems on Earth and even in the universe. We've seen that. But then what is the second phase? Concerns. Oh my goodness. As concerns about ethics, integrity of degrees, cheating, concerns about privacy. You know, you're giving this information to these systems. And one thing that I really want you to remember from this is, if you are not paying for a product, you are the product. Remember this. So when you're giving this and you're using this for free, someone is using your data. Also, concerns about copyrights. I think probably I really highly recommend that you do some search. You can use ChatGPT for the search. On New York Times suing ChatGPT for taking their data and their reports and offering it there. It's a huge case. It's a case where the laws are lagging behind the technology. And now, after this, and we're still in this phase, I think, we're starting to think about integration in what we do. Tim said it very nicely. It would be foolish to fight this. And some university did. It's the wrong approach. I think the right approach is how to integrate it. And at UNF, we decided that we will follow a very balanced approach that prone innovation, discovery, but with responsible use, with ethical use. We are integrating it in the curriculum of what we teach, how we assess, and we will talk a little bit more about that, but also in the way we do research. One of our strategic priorities is research that actually matters, relevant, that help us solve challenges. And also, we are looking at ways how we can use or leverage or increase the efficiency of the tasks that we do every day for our staff. The idea here is not to replace, but to help, to augment. That's why I really don't like artificial intelligence. I like augmented intelligence. That's why now, our internal auditors is asking for standardization for templates. The staff is spending endless times trying to come back. It's like, no, why? Go, take from ChatGPT and then make it your own, make it better. That's how we do things, all these tasks. And I think finally, we want this also as a university in this great community to help and partner with great colleagues to offer programs so that we can educate not just our students, but our community to be AI literate. And that's what we're trying to do. So thank you.
Well, I too want to thank John for inviting us, and particularly me. We talk a lot, and Tim referred to this, we talk a lot about, and if you walk into JAX USA today, there's a 100% chance they're going to communicate with you about this area being a region, not a county and not a city. And so including St. John's, I think is indicative of the fact that John recognizes that, and I certainly appreciate that. So when he called me and asked me to be on this panel, he said, well, there are two reasons in particular that I need you to be on this panel. The first is that I too want to demonstrate that that we are taking a regional approach to how we're going to deliver higher education in Northeast Florida. not just in Jacksonville and not just in Duval County. And if you're not there, then it very well could be just a Jacksonville, Duval County panel. The second reason, he said, was because, of course, I know that you are a lawyer and a politician, and nobody's had more formal training in artificial intelligence than you have in your life. And so I need you to be there for your particular insights and expertise. And so here I am. And so with that background knowledge, I would suggest to everyone in the room, we just need to take a big deep breath and relax. If you look on your weather app, which I did this morning, because I wanted to see how long it was going to be cool here in Florida, but that's not what I saw first. What I saw first was it's going to rain in California. Well, you know, they could have led with a lot of things, like more needed rain coming to California. Reservoirs are going to continue to be filled and recover from the decades-long drought. But that's not what it said, of course. It said, you know, torrential rains, flash flooding, potential mudslides, landslides, blah, blah, blah. And that's my reason for suggesting we should all just relax about this and take a deep breath and understand that it is our role. It's remarkable to me that I hear that some universities, institutions of higher education even want to do something other than embrace it and accept our role as the responsibility we have for being a leader in accepting it, understanding it, managing it to the extent that we can. I think it is a remarkably exciting time for us, understanding that if we don't do it as education leaders, somebody else will. And maybe that's the problem. We can help control, and we can certainly help formulate the message, or we can let someone else do it for us. And I would suggest that we are uniquely qualified to both help deliver the message, create the message, but also with our audience to spread the message of how AI can be used and should be used to a greater audience than almost anyone else can, and hopefully a receptive audience. So that's what I think we should do, and thank you for having me, and I look forward to the rest of the panel.
Thank you, gentlemen. Before we go on to the next question, I did neglect to mention that Dr. Faison, president of Edward Waters University, sent his regrets that he would be unable to attend. So we were hoping to have a perspective from all of our local regional college and university presidents. Scott has our second question.
So this question is for Presidents Lamiam and Avendano. We've kind of touched upon this in general already. Hope we can drill down a little further, though. How has AI already changed the student learning experience at your institution? And how do you envision AI shaping the future of teaching and learning on your campuses?
Thank you. Great question. The impact is already huge. You know, I remember when this came about, a colleague of mine one of our faculty, and said, can you imagine a student graduating with a master's degree or even a doctoral degree without having to write even one sentence? Scary thought, right? Really is scary thought. And you know what? It is possible if we do not pay attention to ethical use of AI. So when ChatGPT started being used extensively by all students everywhere, we were very quick at UNF to train our faculty and really hold a lot of workshops. And we have a repository. They can go to a website where they see different usage, practical usage, ethical usage of generative AI. So this is where it is a dilemma, right? Because you cannot stop it. Actually, you should encourage the use, but at the same time, you don't want to jeopardize the integrity of our degrees or the critical thinking of our students. And without going too much details, I think the main idea is to start using the output of ChatGPT as an input to learning and not output for learning. Let me explain that. So now our faculty will ask students to go to ChatGPT, enter certain prompt, get that output, but then use their own critical thinking to criticize it and come up with their own analysis, their own report, or their own report. And that's really the way, at a very high level, what we need to do. And also be very strict about every unethical use of this. And so we are now starting a batch on responsible use for AI that every single student at UNF needs to take. It's mandatory. Our hope, we open it also to our communities and friends from different universities and community members. We are also changing our curriculum to include courses and programs on generative AI, and trying to see how we can use AI to help students. You know, research show that we don't learn the same way, right? Different learning styles for different students, for different humans. What would be a great way to use AI to customize learning, to use adaptive learning, where the way I learn and the material is presented is very different from Tim or John or Joe. That's what it is. Also, for feedback, giving quick feedback and personalized feedback to the learner. That's really important. So these are the things that we are trying to prone. The biggest advice is professional development for faculty is really important, and also emphasize the critical thinking. That's what is really important. Yes, you can use generative AI and emphasize and prone and facilitate critical thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, Moaz. A couple of interesting thoughts. I'm going to start with, how will this impact student learning as they go forward? So I spent the last handful of days asking students, tell me what you do. Tell me tell me your knowledge of generative AI, how you would use it, have you used it, etc. And it's interesting because I think every one of us in here probably came into today's session with some preconceived notions of what it can do, what it can't do, the pros and the cons. So again, like I said, I just thought it was important to start asking some of the students, albeit it wasn't deep research, right? It was maybe about 8 or 10 students that I asked, tell me what you think about this, have you used it, etc. And like I said, depending on the lens you're looking at, I had a couple of students who really said they didn't really use it much at all, but their concern was completely different than what we're talking about today. Their concern was their voice being able to be replicated and used. I said earlier about the pros and the cons, or how people can use it from a positive standpoint and a negative standpoint. So these students were reflective on the fact that they were concerned that somebody could then mimic their voice, call their parents, and ask for money because they've been kidnapped or something has happened. Right? If you don't think that can happen, if anybody paid attention to the most recent New Hampshire primaries, that was done for a presidential candidate. Okay, they mimicked the voice and they called people throughout that area and kind of instructed them what to do or what not to do on election day. That person had no idea that this was happening. So that is something that, again, it's a negative way of how that can be used. Other students have talked about the fact, they do use it from a research standpoint. They do use it to maybe structure some better writing and how they articulate their points of view using ChatGPT, et cetera. And not that anyone would ever admit to me that they use it for academic integrity or a lack of academic integrity, but you can kind of read through them enough to know that, that potential is always there. But as we've all said, we're not going to be able to stop it, right? Students are going to use it. How do you instruct them? How do you guide them? How do the faculty, because this is really an in-classroom discussion and conversation, how do they instruct them as to how to go about using these tools? For those, and I'll show my age, maybe not for the younger group here, you might remember back in the 80s, the advent of audio-visual two-way communication and instruction was done via microwave, right? So you could be taking classes, distance learning, at another high school, and it was an efficiency model. You could be at multiple different locations. A faculty member could be at one location, teaching to 3 or 4 different locations, could be teaching Mandarin, right? Maybe you couldn't get enough for your one class, but now you have a class of about 16 spread across the district. The big concern was, well, how do we know that that's the right person in the class, right? And as distance learning continued to advance, the concern was always, how do we know that the academic integrity is still being followed? Is this the right person in the class? Are they cheating during exams? They're at a distance further. We got past all that, and we've embraced online education, right? The questions probably still exist. We'll get past this. We'll find ways to embrace AI, right? But as I said earlier, the people who are wired differently, maybe I shouldn't say it that way. The people who are wired in such a way to want to do something bad with it are going to do something bad with it, just like they do something bad with everything else. The people who find ways to embrace it and use it to enhance what they're trying to do, what they're trying to learn, how they go about their education, are going to use it for the right reasons as well, with the proper prompting, right? From faculty, from the institution, from policies. I know our faculty senate has taken a position of instructing how they would address these issues. They know what's going to happen, right? They know that students are going to use it possibly to cheat, but how do you then address it? Because their first response shouldn't be to kick them out of the school, right? So we're embracing it from that standpoint, knowing that it's going to be part of a tool as we go forward. How do I envision it shaping the future? Again, I think that there are ways that we can apply it. So think, again, just as I asked students what their thoughts were and how they use it or go about their business with artificial intelligence, I asked a few professionals, same thing. From a hospital standpoint, AI is built into a lot of the equipment that they use on a day-to-day basis. They can predict, based on analysis and predictive analysis of their vitals, whether the person is subject to have something of a more catastrophic episode in their life. Wouldn't you want to know if you were you had a predisposition to possibly a stroke or a heart attack, and they could affect that in advance? If you're going into the field of healthcare, you should know that this is going to happen. Had the wonderful experience of going to the dentist yesterday, and I asked him, is there any AI in how you go about your business? And he said, yeah, absolutely. We're able to take scans of people's teeth, right? We can, if somebody has you can take that scan, they could do 3D modeling from that. They can look to see if something should happen to that person. They can recreate the teeth the way they had it before, should something catastrophic happen to that person. So there's a lot of positive ways that we can use AI. So to stop it, first of all, we know we're not going to, we've all said this, we're not going to stop that. When you hear about us talking about embracing it, it's because the real world is embracing it and it's using it now. So we need to think about how that is happening, how we incorporate that into the classroom. Recognizing all along that it's going to be used for the wrong purposes at times, but let's find ways to use it for the right reasons and educate students that way. I can't remember, one of my colleagues here on campus had suggested maybe one of the first classes we teach in all of our institutions is a class on ethics, right? Maybe that should be a core requirement for everybody, for life, right? To understand, if nothing else, if you know you're going to do something wrong, you know you're doing something wrong, and you know there's going to be consequences at some point. And maybe if nothing else, people would have second thoughts. So thank you.
the next question will be for President Cost and President Pickens. This is a hypothetical scenario, so bear with me for just a moment while I explain the scenario and have the question. Your institution has developed a cutting-edge AI system that can deliver highly personalized instruction to each student. This AI system analyzes students' learning styles, performance, and engagement levels to tailor the educational content, pace, and teaching methods specifically to each student's learning needs. While this AI platform promises a revolution in personalized education, there are concerns about the impact on the traditional role of faculty, the potential for over-reliance on technology in education, and issues surrounding data privacy and the ethical use of student information. Here's the question. In light of this scenario—
Easy so far.
Easy so far, yes. No problem. I'm over here sweating. I'm like, this sounds like my job. In light of this scenario, how can educators ensure that AI is used responsibly and enhances rather than diminishes teaching and learning?
Yeah, okay, wow, interesting. So for those of you, if you know anybody that gets called visionary, I want you to think of that person. Maybe it's you, because this is a visioning question. And I have found in my 32 years in corporate America, the people who could go out and see the future a little better than others didn't start with today. And that's what I think is going to challenge us on this type of scenario. Everything you're thinking about with AI starts essentially in its current incarnation, large language models generatively, with OpenAI announcing on November 30th ChatGPT. But as we talked about before, there have been Siri, there's been Alexa, there's been tons of things in your past that you found a way to drive to places you never could drive before. You were relying on some type of augmented intelligence, to use Moiz's term. So on this one, the idea that we can sit here today and say today's student, today's faculty, today's technology, what might you do? I'm asking us to look at it differently, and it's a way that we're pushing ourselves over at Jacksonville University, which is let's go out 5 years. This is very helpful always in everything. It helped get us to a law school decision, a medical school decision, a STEAM institute, an honors college, and it had us set aside veterinary and tourism and other things. You go out there and you say, so what is it like in Pickett 2030? By that time, what are the students? The students at that point have had generative AI in their lives for 8 years. See, today we're thinking we're all at this standing start and we get handed, and it's a very good question because it's got to be the life of most faculty members. What we're finding is with each passing year, take it today, January, February of 24, we've got students, take the ones who came in August of 23, they've only had this version of OpenAI in their lives for 9 months. Let's go out another year. Let's go out another year. That's what I was meaning, and my colleagues and I have talked about before, about hitting this moving target. So you have to go back to first principles. Academic integrity, honesty, clarity. We think customized service, because we're a small university, we're a fraction of the size of these gentlemen, this idea of bespoke. Anything that generative AI can do, which is very good at aggregating huge amounts of existing data on the fly, faster than any, I mean, I use it every morning, 5:30 to 6:30, I'm trying everything. The first time Bard came out, Copilot came out, ChatGPT, because I want to stay current on it, and it is moving fast. We're in generation 4. I like to think I'm probably almost as good. It's not, and thank God. We haven't said yet, this is not an IT issue. This is an institution-wide, industry-wide, country-wide, city-wide, it's a big issue. So the concepts of you look out into the future and say, how do you deal with these things? We do teach ethics. If I look inside our law school, it's a huge part of what's going on inside the law school. And I think a well legally trained mind, to quote our deans and vice deans and associate deans, is incredibly powerful. And we already have 3 professors in there who are published on this, plus the associate dean, plus the dean. So that idea of having a different base, we could talk all day about kind of all the things that are out there, and I think we have to get to it, that scare us about this. I mean, the use of Joe Biden's voice was stunning. I mean, and so pretty soon you see the use of Taylor Swift's face on something, okay? Then pretty soon, maybe it's your boss. There's the old school email going, or as an email, spoofing email going around right now around JU, where for some reason Tim Cost is asking everyone to buy a toolkit and a chainsaw. Right? And I think I got some people here today who did. And I apologize because it fits my personality. But that idea of kind of the old school use of email for negative, this idea of all the way back to kind of first principles, I think AI is already making universities better. We're having conversations about how does a 17 to 25,000 student university like UNF and a 4,000 student university like ours, and what are you, 30, 40? How do we address this same issue when this would be easier if it were one-on-one instruction? In other words, every question we could ask a student today, they can go to AI, they can pull up everything we want, but the faculty have changed the question to say, and now equate that to one personal instance in your life. You can't get that from ChatGPT. You have got to make that yours. And so that puts a burden on the faculty, and I'm back to congratulating the faculty to all these schools. They are on this. I don't see a large contingent anymore saying, you got to get us out of this. You got to block this from, Tim, write a policy. Where's the federal government? I don't hear that. We will embrace this technology, and I'll pass it on. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim.
President Pickett. Yeah, thank you so much. He's ready to answer the question. Yes, yes.
Sorry.
If you feel particularly called, so that explains it. I had no idea there's not a toolkit or a chainsaw to be found in Palatka anywhere, and now I understand. So I see it as two questions. One, how can we ensure that it's used responsibly? And then two, how can we ensure that it enhances rather than diminishes instruction? I think the answer to the first question, unfortunately, is that we can't. And you all talked about that. We can ensure that we use it responsibly. We can ensure that we communicate how it can be used responsibly. And again, I think that goes back to what I said in the beginning. That's our role. But we need to understand, again, as you said, it's going to be used irresponsibly, and we also have to be prepared for that. Tim mentioned that this is not an IT issue, but an IT analogy, I think, resonates with me. Think of just among the four of us, the tens of millions of dollars that we spend every year in our IT departments trying to make sure that we don't get attacked. An expense that didn't exist, within our lifetimes. And so I think that we are probably going to, as this evolves, also have to spend a lot of money over time, making sure to the best we can that it is not, number one, it's not used against us, but number two, making sure that we recognize when it's being used responsibly and also when it's being used irresponsibly. How can we ensure that it enhances rather than diminishes instruction, especially in the classroom? I do think, like Tim Cost, the businessman, when I hear that part of the question, what a great opportunity. The printing press did not eliminate the need for faculty, but why didn't it? Here's the book. All you have to do is read it, and it has all of the information that you need. And so why didn't faculty way back then become textbook authors as opposed to instructors? Well, it goes back to the human element that we talked about and we're going to talk about later that is absolutely necessary. Calculators certainly didn't eliminate the need for math instructors. And well, why didn't, if you put a textbook and a calculator together, then why didn't that eliminate the need for math instructors? Well, because it didn't, and this isn't going to eliminate the need for the human element in the role of humans learning, which means humans teaching and learning. And so I think that's why the opportunity, I'm going to use an example that some of my staff suggested that I don't. And so my children went to St. John's, at least in dual enrollment, and then they went on to institutions elsewhere, frankly, across the country. And so I was very curious about the difference in what a class was like at Yale or the University of Chicago or UCF as opposed to their experience at St. John's. And they all said, frankly, the experience was more dependent upon the instructor than it was the institution that I was at the time. And I found that to be remarkably confirming on the value of the human element of instructors wherever they are. But one did also say that when I get to class, I am expected to know the content. And we spend our time discussing robustly the content as opposed to learning the content. Well, in the context of this particular scenario where faculty and the institution now have this remarkable program that helps students individually based upon how they learn and understand content more quickly and more completely for them, then I think it opens up a whole lot more time for faculty to do what you probably enjoy way more, and that is discussing the content rather than telling about the content and hoping that they know it. And so that's my example, but I would expect that as faculty, you have 100 ideas about how, if you had that for real, this is what you could do with it, and these are the things that you would do with it. And so I see it as a remarkable opportunity. I'm not faculty. And when I got to St. John's 15 years ago, I made it clear, although everyone knew that my path was, in fact, in law and then in the legislature, that I wasn't a faculty. And that the one thing they could rest assured of was that I was not going to ever show up in a classroom and suggest to them that I know how to teach, period. Much less that I know how to teach better than they do. I have the highest regard for people who do things that I can't do and that I haven't done. And there is a constant reminder in the job that I currently have every day that faculty is in that group. It isn't just in that group, it is the group. It's the main group. It's the most important group in my life of people who do something every day that I don't do and that I can't do. And so my plea would be for my faculty is you take this scenario and you tell me how we should help you use it in the classroom, and you tell me how we should be worried about other people using it in your classroom. And my job as an administrator is to support you and give you the resources that you need in order to make your dream of this program become real and to eliminate the concerns that you have about its use in whatever way you deem appropriate in your classroom for your college in this case.
Thank you. And I appreciate the confirmation of job security that you both provided. Our next question will come from Professor Cason.
This question is for Presidents Avendano and Lamiam. The topic essentially is dealing with workflows and efficiency. How do you foresee AI impacting workloads and job roles across the different employee groups at your institution, particularly in areas like electronic communication, virtual conferencing, and automated administrative tasks? Additionally, how might AI influence your role and responsibilities as a college or university president?
Thank you. Tim, you reminded me of a few years ago when these spoofing emails started. I was traveling to China, and an email was sent to all faculty and staff from me, of course, supposedly, and saying that I was stuck and lost my wallet and I needed some gift certificates. Yeah, you probably heard that this was earlier on, and I was so worried because no one from faculty and staff sent anything to me. Yeah. But anyway, this is really a great question, and a lot of faculty and staff are worried. You know, are we losing our jobs because of this? going back to what I said earlier, this is about augmenting intelligence, not replacing intelligence. At UNF, the timing could not have been better. We are in the process of implementing a new enterprise resource planning system to manage all aspects of the university called Workdays. So at the same time, we're among very few universities to sign a partnership with Microsoft to adopt Copilot. Copilot is the equivalent ChatGPT for Microsoft. And we are exactly using it now to see how we become more effective and more efficient in the jobs that we do every day, especially the routine ones. Talk about, for example, administrative assistant taking meeting minutes. Now incorporated with Copilot and Teams, the meeting minutes are generated automatically. Of course, we always still need the human to look at it, abbreviate it, make it our own. Course scheduling is a tedious, repetitive task. That's the task where we can benefit from ChatGPT. Any human resources, routine tasks and checks that can be done by generative AI. So I think it's really important to understand that this is not about job displacement. This is about making job richer. Research show very clearly that routine, boring tasks lead to job dissatisfactions and to turnover. So this is how we're trying to do. Now, of course, this is not possible without very good professional development for our faculty and staff. That's why we're spending a lot of time and resources to train our faculty and staff, again, for responsible, ethical use of AI. So we're reassuring everybody, you will not lose your job because of AI. You might lose it for other things, but not for AI. Thank you.
Kind of similar to Moaz, I actually thought about this, and I thought, what if I told you all that AI was going to replace presidents of colleges and universities? Right? That's the first thing that I thought too. We didn't work on that. My first thought was we get a round of applause, right? And absolutely, I understand where people are really kind of concerned about this. To Tim's point, because we're at such an early stage, right? So we don't know its capabilities of what can happen as we go down the road. We've all said, we've all talked about the human element of what needs to be as part of the relationship between that student and the faculty member in the classroom, right? Because ChatGPT can only respond to the prompt that's given to them, to it. As Tim had mentioned, how do you personalize that? Well, you personalize that by that relationship that happens between the individuals that are there. Same thing is true from the workforce standpoint, right? It is enriched through your colleagues and people that you work with. More often than not, I could be wrong, more often than not, people are like, I do the job because it helps pay the bills and I can support a family and so on, but I really enjoy, the joy comes from in working with others that you are having to share offices with or you share an institution with, et cetera. Part of human nature as well, the human element, part of human nature is also the stigma we put on certain words. So if I said to my institution today, we're going to change this, you insert it. The first thought is to stand back and resist. That's kind of human nature because we don't know what that's going to do to us personally. We don't know what's going to do to our jobs, right? And so, what do we do? Maybe I'm only speaking for myself, but I have a good idea that most people would do the same thing. We shackle ourselves to the desk and chairs and we're not moving and we're going to hold our ground, right? But if I say we're going to innovate, we're going to do something different, and you get the chance to think differently about not only your job, but how we serve students and how we educate people. And so the simple change of just changing the word change to innovate, which is, I think, how we need to embrace artificial intelligence. Now, I would challenge my colleagues, we are also businesses, right? We need to find technologies that make our experiences for our employees and for our students and for the institution as efficiently as possible. Not just efficient, but creating an experience that some of people have heard me talk about this, it becomes a wow experience through the use of technology. One of the students that I had talked to earlier, I had mentioned before, I shared with them, I said, well, give me an idea how you think the college, almost this very question, how can the college adapt to create an experience for you? This particular student was a bit bashful, all right? And they said, I don't speak up a lot in class. I enjoy face-to-face. This particular student enjoyed which is probably why I found them on campus, right? They enjoyed face-to-face more so than the online environment. They kind of like the hybrid. But what if that student was able, through some assessment, to say, this is who I am? Back, I think it's to Moez's point. And find a way of customizing an educational experience that really helped the student be successful. If they were a bashful student, they don't speak up in class, they're smart, they're looking for people who they can relate to because they're introverts in that one-on-one environment. They're looking for advisors who understand who they are, right? If they happen to be an international student who may also make them feel comfortable and welcomed into not only Jacksonville, but to this country, what if they could find some assessment, we could find ways to customize. Then we become the AI instrument. We have that information. We can customize that educational experience on campus for that student and create something that becomes memorable for them for the future. So we need to find ways to continue to augment the things that we do here. But the reality is, if there are some perfunctory, mundane tasks that happen every day that bring about some level of disengagement with the organization, why continue to do that? I know people say, well, that's because that's my job. No, we find other ways that we can use your skills and your interpersonal skills to create an environment that will be a wow experience for students.
Thank you, gentlemen. We're going to skip ahead to our last question, and this is a question for all of our presidents. Dr. A, since you have the speaking stick, we will start with you. Our final question before we open it up to our participants. Consider the following statement from Chief Justice Roberts. In his 2023 year-end report, he acknowledged the potential of AI to dramatically increase access to key information while cautioning against its ability to invade privacy interests and dehumanize the law. He remarked on the irreplaceable human capacity to interpret a shaking hand, a quivering voice, a change of inflection, a bead of sweat, a moment's hesitation, a fleeting break in eye contact. Here's the question. How can the colleges and universities of Northeast Florida prepare students for the changing landscape described by Roberts?
I think almost all of us talked about the humanizing effect of the business that we're in, right? I love that quote. Actually, it really speaks to, I guess it speaks to me, to who I am. Many of you all know this, right? I'm an in-person, while I'm an introvert and while I am bashful, I am an in-person, one-on-one, small group type of a person, my personality. I enjoy that. I feel more comfortable in that environment. And that's not going to go away. Now, so how can we all work together on that? Again, I think hopefully you can kind of pick up from the banter that we go back and forth, that we really are close friends. We really do associate with each other on a regular basis, not just for this, but even on personal things. This is one of those areas that I do think that we can truly collaborate across all of our respective purposes and missions to support Northeast Florida, and that is, what does Bank of America expect from its employees in the future, right, at all levels? What are the core values that they all expect from an employment standpoint? We can collaborate on this, and we can build in some skill sets. We can build on some interpersonality traits across all of our curricula that would help students understand what's going to be expected of them into the future. So we're in the human business, the learning that goes along with being human, right? So I think this is one of those opportunities, like I said, that we can all embrace, we can all work together on, collaborate with, and find ways to best meet the needs of all of our students across any of our respective institutions and beyond.
Thanks. That's about the 10th time I've heard you call yourself an introvert, and I'm not buying it. You called a damn global town hall. I mean, we're here. We're your guests. So, yeah, you're a good man. Couple thoughts, because I think this question gets at a number of things we already talked about. By its nature, tomorrow I start my 12th year in this job at my alma mater, and what I've learned about higher education is it's unfailingly optimistic. The people who do it, there's a self-selection bias in this room. You're here. You're around 18 to 24-year-olds, maybe all the way through doctorates. It's their futures, it's their energy, it's their families. I cannot tell you how much that's different than the Fortune 100 world I came from, which was a completely different culture. So it's this optimistic outlook. And so as you skipped ahead to this question, I wrote one word down: partnership. The way that this four schools perhaps can punch way beyond its weight is not only how we partner with each other, where we've got a lot of room and we all know it and we're pretty open with each other about it, but it's what we know is going on at Florida Blue, the Mayo Clinic, Bank of America, CSX, Avali. We know we're all having those conversations. We all partner with those corporations, those hospital systems. They are so far up this curve on this subject of AI. I spent 2 hours at Florida Blue. Is anybody from Florida Blue here? Probably not, so I won't betray any confidences there because I sit on their board. But the work they're doing in AI, and you'd say, Florida Blue, let me see if I can put that out. They're not worried exactly what industry they're in. They're applying AI to make their own employees better. And you hold that over here. What's the Mayo Clinic doing with it? Research. I will quote you, Gianrico Ferrugia, who lets me use his name here, and I'll pass it on. When we had lunch together about 6 months ago, and I said, am I overdoing this whole AI thing? I think it's a chance for JU to get out in front of things and get things done. In other words, there's an opening here for those who are willing to take risk. And he went way beyond anything I would have thought of, because Gianrico's that much smarter than I am. And they're spending so much money and time. And at the end of the lunch, I said, can you give me one example that I can quote you on? The Mayo Clinic. It doesn't get any better than that in the world. And he said, sure. This is the CEO of the Mayo Clinic, Rochester, Minnesota. He said, with just ChatGPT, this was when we were in generation 2, right? We're up to 4. He said, we can diagnose heart disease 5 years earlier than before we had this tool, and we can do it in 5 minutes. I said, all right, let me just play it back, because of course I don't understand that sentence. Well, let me play it back to you. And he said, yeah, that's true. And he said, you have no idea where we'll be a year from now. That was a year ago. Okay, and he and I have a breakfast coming up. So that concept of what can the ecosystem called higher ed in Northeast Florida do, you hear us talk a lot about relationship, the ability to interact directly with the student. There's this superpower that the corporations are looking at. This morning's front page of the Wall Street Journal, Microsoft is about to overtake Apple as the most valuable company in the world on the back of Copilot. That's how much that's worth. So hold us to account, please, on our ability to partner with each other and ability to partner with the others in the community and to take down the silos inside our own universities. And I think AI is a catalyst for that, because all of the 5 deans and all of the faculty in our university, I'm sure at yours, are working together on this one. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. I really echo what John and Tim said about the importance of partnerships. Partnerships among us as educational institutions, but also partnerships with the community, with the business community. So I will not repeat that. But what I want to just emphasize is the importance of preparing a new generation of talent. It's so obvious to us that because of these, and now because of ChatGPT and similar systems, People call them soft skills. I call them life skills. They're really lacking. They really are. Basic communication skills, negotiation skills, influence skills, just shaking hands, writing email in a language that us older people can understand. Yeah, so I remember I was just checking on my teenager daughter a few years ago, and she was using one of the social media, and then she wrote POS, and everything stopped. It's like, okay, for me, POS, that's point of sale. What does it mean? Said, no, it's parent over shoulders. So that's not a language that we understand. That's why I really think now we have to question, revamp how we educate the new generations. This is why at UNF, we are starting certificates outside the classroom for resilience, for emotional intelligence, for dealing with fake news. You know, one of the story that showed up on my social media was a picture of Joe Biden and Donald Trump hanging in together, barbecue and drinking. Yeah, that is impossible, right? But you look at the picture that is generated by AI, you really think it is true. Let's push it a little bit further. What is the sad things that are happening in the Middle East now, and the proliferations of fake news from all parts? Who are the consumers of these news? This is all of us, but the vulnerable population is our younger generations, our students. This is why I really think more than ever before, we need to emphasize this resiliency, this emotional intelligence, dealing with the fake news and being just critical thinker. And this is why I think more than ever before, partnerships, putting our resources together, our faculty, staff, IT resources, so that not just educate and help prepare our students for generations to come, but also open it to all community members. I think we owe it to our communities that we are a resource for them to know how to deal with these fake news, to know how to make a responsible, ethical use of these technologies, how not to become just users of this technology, but critical thinkers of these technologies. So that's my message. Thank you.
So frankly, I think my thoughts are the same as Moaz's. I'm just going to translate it into Southern for you. Because they really are. Every adjective that Justice Roberts used signified the human element. And so I think what he was really saying was, at least not yet, AI cannot duplicate that. It can copy it, but it can't duplicate that. So I think how we respond to that, how we prepare our students to, for the changing landscape, how are we doing it now? In the instances that we live with every day that eliminate the human element that we used to take for granted. Homeschooling, working remotely. And for me, I think the biggest one is online instruction. We all know, if you've taught a class or been around a class, you know of students that failed a class online and then made an A in person. And sure, they had the advantage of the background of the instruction that they obviously didn't pay a lot of attention to when they made the F, but more likely than not, it wasn't that they had seen the content before. It was that they had the benefit of the interaction with an instructor in person, and that was a better way of learning for them. When we talked about homeschooling and we said, well, they can get that social interaction, at church or, in Little League or in a million other things. They don't need to go to school and be forced to interact with students. And certainly I lamented during the time that we closed the college in COVID, the interaction with people. I got better at feeling like I was interacting with someone through a computer until we got back together, and I realized that you were just making the best of it, but it really wasn't the same. And so I think that that's what Justice Roberts was getting at. AI can invent, but it can't create, at least not yet. Only people can create something new out of nothing, something new not from something that already existed. What AI does is it invents things from things that we have already created. And it probably is only going to improve to the extent that we continue to create and therefore supply more information for it to invent. It can do things much faster than we can, and I think we would all embrace that. In my organization, if it can do things much faster than someone in student services can, that's not going to eliminate that person's job. That's going to give that person the opportunity to do more. I would never suggest to you, for instance, in student services, that we are doing everything that we need to do, and we're doing it as well as we possibly can. So if AI can do it for me, it's going to take your job. Because we're not doing everything we possibly could, nor are we doing it as well as we could. And so if AI can do things for us more quickly, more efficiently, maybe even more accurately, then it allows my people to do more with the time that they have, because they are not using that time for what they're doing now. Pretty much the same as my response to instruction, where if you're not spending time on the things that you are now because AI is assisting you, then you can spend it on other things. And so I hope that I'm right about my interpretation of what Justice Roberts was speaking about, because I really hope that he's right about humanity.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your very thoughtful responses to our questions. A round of applause, please, for our panelists. We would like to now invite our virtual and in-person participants to ask questions. If you are in person, we would appreciate if you could raise your hand and someone will bring you a microphone so that we can hear you online. We'll take 2 in person to start, and then we'll shift to see if there are any questions virtually. I see a hand right here, and there's also one in the back corner over there.
Did you say you're only taking 2?
Just for right now, we're going to take 2 in person, 1 virtual, and then we'll come back to in person. So if anybody else does have an in-person question, we will do our best to get to you. Yes.
Good morning. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. This was really enlightening. I took a lot of notes. Quick question, and I don't know how to frame it, so bear with me. I really appreciate the regional approach to this issue. As someone who supervises adjunct instructors at this institution, we're kind of all over the map with how I'm all over the map with how I guide them. So I have 2 questions. Will your institutions have any kind of policy, written policy, for instance, for someone like me who has instructors, all over, that will kind of guide them but also allow them academic freedom? And then 2, looking ahead at the future, I really appreciated, Mr. Cost, you talking about that. The Florida DOE has some say in what happens in our state. So do you anticipate any kind of regulation or directives coming from the state and how we can deal with AI? Thank you.
Just because I happen to end up with a microphone certainly doesn't mean I'm the right person to answer this question, but I would tell you that policy is inevitable, I think, both at the local level and maybe, unfortunately, having been a legislator, maybe I have the license to say that at the state level too. But one thing I learned, and why I say it's inevitable, is because of this. When I was in the legislature, I realized that almost every law that we passed, and it had been passed, was to regulate the conduct of some group of people who had demonstrated an inability to conduct themselves appropriately. And sometimes the entire state's conduct is regulated because of the conduct of a few people in somewhere else, but that's what happens. And so that's why I say that policies, both at the local and the state level, are inevitable. I think that right now, there may be some degree of trepidation because we not sure we know, and we might do something that is in good faith and even in good conscience, but is not in good practice. And so I think that of all the times that communication is going to have to occur. What a great concept, communication among people when we're in a forum talking about how do we deal with artificial things. Maybe that's just proving my point in the end, that I think that we're going to have to communicate amongst ourselves within our organizations and develop the best policy we can. But the short answer is, I would think, and maybe you do too, that it is inevitable. It's just a matter of when and what it looks like.
Thank you, Jono. Tim is smiling here. He's like, I don't care what they decide. I'm a private university here. Yeah, but in all seriousness here, I think regulation will come. That's the phases of innovations. You know, you talk about, we were talking about Justice Robert. Now, federal courts dictates on all lawyers, when they submit any document, they have to sign and attest that it's not generated by ChatGPT or any other system. And if it is, they have to mention exactly which part of that disposition or that document. So it is coming. And you're probably all reading now about the bill going about the limiting the use of social media by teenagers. That's one. I think this is where us academic leaders come in. And the weight is now on our shoulders to try to inform legislators about the importance of academic freedom, the importance of the integrity of our degrees and our education. And this is what we've been doing, and this is what we need to continue doing. And this is why, again, partnerships are really important. When we all sing the same tune, where we're all on the same page, legislators will listen, and the new laws or policies or bills will not jeopardize the freedom, academic freedom and integrity of our degrees.
Thanks. Thanks. Just one quick thought, because those two really covered it well. So much about the AI revolution is about speed. You know, how quickly after you get the right prompt in there do you get the 30 pages back? It's less than 10 seconds. I think it's the same with where you're going with the regulation. Regulation over time following innovation is always slow, late, or non-existent. If I asked everybody, how heavily regulated was the internet when you first got on it? How heavily regulated was Facebook when you first saw it? How heavily regulated do you think TikTok is today for 11-year-olds, let alone college kids? So that idea that they're chasing, we just had a chance to do Steve Wozniak, interview him up on the stage in front of a couple thousand people to raise money for a hospital here in town. And I asked him this question about, if you could do it over again with everything you learned, how would you regulate where AI is going? And his answer, which got a huge laugh, which I didn't understand, was, I think everybody who's been a leader of a tech company that's gotten us to here in the digital revolution should be executed. And I mean, the crowd erupted in laughter, and that's freaking Steve Wozniak saying that. I mean, the guy who invented the Apple II computer. So he never actually came out to the other side. So kind of where Moez was a second ago, the idea that it's self-regulation right now. You can see the OpenAI CEO saying and getting an agreement across his industry, we're not going to let deep fake video become part of the political discourse. I mean, they're saying that. That's not coming down from the Congress. I agree, this state, you look at what Paul Renner's doing now to get out in front of, you know, what a 16-year-old or younger can get their hands on. I think I wouldn't wait around for regulation to protect you from the fears of all this. And exactly what Moez said, the note I got from our law folks, the Florida Bar recently issued a draft advisory ethics opinion on the proper use of AI. That's how it gets regulated. It doesn't necessarily come from the Supreme Court.
Ditto. No. A couple of things. One, I think from and our faculty have already done this. At least they started this through Faculty Senate, and I think in-classroom type policy should have that discourse amongst the faculty, whether it's full-time or adjunct, right? It doesn't matter. And the bottom line is they should have a good understanding of how they're going to work with this, keeping in mind, the students that we serve and ultimately what's the goal. There are going to be teaching moments and learning moments within that process, especially for academic integrity, right? Or the lack thereof. And again, I think Joe said it right. Almost every single law or form of regulation has been put into place because of people who have misused something, right? We had, and I think we still have, if you litter on the highway, it's going to be a $500 fine, maybe not more than that now. Why? Because people were littering on the highway. And so it is a form of control. I think the way our faculty have approached this, which I have appreciated, is establishing the guardrails, right? Knowing that those guardrails may expand, they may constrict a little bit, but I think that in classroom type policy, institutions will look at those policies and obviously adopt those policies and work with those policies, just so there's some level of consistency. Because if somebody, and again, it can vary very much by department. One of the things I didn't mention from a positive thing of how AI is being used, we have a high school group, a group of high school students who work on robotics on our campus, right? And one of the questions, again, I had asked them a couple of months ago, and that was, I asked them, tell me what you enjoy, because we're incorporating artificial intelligence, and these robots are doing things, they're automating the work that can be done someday, right? So we don't want to stop that. And if somebody said, well, you can't do that, again, I just think it's going to hold us back. So.
There was another question in the back, I believe. Yes, right back here.
Hi, as both a student as well as an employee at FSCJ, I hear that you have the job security, and this is for everyone, of course. I hear the aspect of the job security, but is there also the student security to where when we do submit that paper or that outline, and when it's taken through that scanner to see if it is artificial intelligence, and it comes back that it is, but you have the students that know this is actually authentic and this is honest, is there something in place for the students that when they're being challenged by artificial intelligence, how do we say, no, this is actually honest work?
Yeah, there's probably a number of different examples, at least that come to my mind. And we've already had, I know I've had a student petition to me that they had done their own honest work, and an instructor said this was really artificially generated and so on. Again, it comes down really, in that case, it really does come down to what does the syllabus say? What is the expectations for our students? What is considered academic honesty or dishonesty from that standpoint? I think, it's kind of like you need to show your work type of deal. But by the same token, if you are using that as a tool, right? If you used, in my day, if you use the encyclopedia, right? Maybe not that far back, but you kind of get the idea. I had to cite that source, right? I had to say, this is where I got the information from. It's probably, to some extent, there's going to be a thread of that in there as well. You need to say, if it's not your work, right? You need to at least tell people that, you need to tell your faculty member it's not your work. Now, if you built upon that, then you cite that source and you say, as a result of this stuff that I found, whether it's ChatGPT or a grouping of information from a variety of sources, you cite that work and you say, but this is how, I think Tim put it well, this is how it would apply in using those critical thinking skills, this is how it would apply to me personally or to the real life situation or something to that extent. So they add to that versus just taking that and passing it off as their own.
Thank you. That was an FSCJ question, I'm sure.
We would like to take a virtual question now, if we could.
Okay. Is my mic working? The question from the virtual world, there's a few of them. I'll start with the first one that came in. There's an increasing amount of ed tech tools that are being integrated with AI to determine retention and persistence as an early intervention practice. How can we embrace what these tools are doing, yet mitigate potential bias in their results?
This is a great question, and it's exactly what we're trying to do now, is use Copilot to increase retention, graduation on time, placement. And this is why now, everything comes with biases. Humans, when they make decisions, they have their own, we have our own biases. And as Joe said it so nicely, artificial intelligence is duplicating the human biases. So the people who wrote these algorithms, who input the data there. So that's why it's really important to go back to the augmented intelligence versus replace. I will never accept a report about student success that is coming solely from ChatGPT or Copilot. I want our people to use their own knowledge to go criticize it and make it our own, so it is good for our students.
Thank you. And so we are running out of time. Let me see if we can take one more in-person question. Yes. Did you have a question that you wanted to ask? We have a microphone right here.
Oh, thank you. Hi, I'm Jill. I'm in the biomed program here at FSCJ, and let me like. Thank you. Okay, so I have a few thoughts. I just need to like put it into words. Okay, so with AI, so with the biomed program, there are many people who go and work for Mayo. And so with the research that Mayo has been doing with AI, I want to know, like, because like you guys have been in communication with Mayo, what are you bringing to the school along with improving the biomed program since COVID? I mean, we lost labs. I mean, some of these classes that we're taking that are 3,000, 4,000 level classes, I've heard that people have gotten degrees without ever holding a microscope. And, you know, like I'm doing these virtual labs where I'm clicking on a button on a microscope on my screen, which does nothing for me. And so like, I would like to see, especially with scientific and, you know, other like really, really important programs, like I would love to see the improvements within that. And then the second point that I wanted to make is just the mental health aspect of all of this. Because with social media, I mean, there has been so much, you know, people talk about how we don't talk to each other anymore. And, you know, people are so like introverted and, you know, there's nothing wrong with that, praise the introverts. But
John, you're good.
But with all of the mental health issues going on in this country, you know, it's just, I would like to see that as well, you know, improved upon.
And we just have time for one response from our panel. If one person could respond. Yes, that would be fantastic. Whoever would like to.
Yours. Did you ever see something pass? It was like a baton. No, it's a great question. Thank you very much. And I appreciate, first of all, thank you for being a student at FSCJ. I greatly appreciate your commitment and your confidence in us. Your first question was, what are we learning from Mayo and bringing back? I can share this with you. So it's not going to answer your question today, but it will answer the question as we go forward. A handful of us are going to go to, so Mayo has a vice president of artificial intelligence on staff, okay? Not here in Phoenix. There's a group of 50 community colleges in Florida, the state colleges, through the Alliance for Innovation and Transformation. We will be in Phoenix with their vice president of artificial intelligence to find out what are the skill sets, what are the things that our students who are going into the medical fields should know. How can they apply that into the fields that they're in? So I don't have the answer yet, but I should have the answer towards the end of July, or at least what the Vice President of Artificial Intelligence will give us. Probably the greatest issue that we all deal with anymore is the issue of mental health, right? And, you know, there's still so much that we haven't not really learned or picked up or recognized from the COVID. I mean, we had mental health issues probably before that, but I really think that exacerbated the issue with students and with everybody for that matter. It was tough. I had colleagues across the country who just said that this was not what they signed up for. None of us, unless one of my colleagues didn't share the manual with me, none of us knew how to deal with COVID and how it would impact our employees, how it would impact our students, how it would impact the learning environment, what online would then do to them, what their social circles meant for them, how their family environment, did they have food or food insecurities? There was so much that was piled into that window of time that we're still kind of reeling from and need to find ways to deal with that, right? So all that is to say is that know that I know I can speak to my former colleagues here, is that we are committed. You need to make sure that the institution is aware and that we have resources. If we don't have resources, how we can reach out to those resources in our community to provide those services for you, because our job is to make sure that you are well prepared for life and for the workforce and for what your personal and professional goals are. And while we can't have every resource available to us, we are all committed to making sure that we have the connections to those resources in our community to provide that for you so that you and anyone, all of your student colleagues, have that greatest opportunity for success.
Thank you, Dr. Avendano. And thank you to all of our team presidents, to our faculty moderators, and to both our in-person and virtual guests. We sincerely hope that today's town hall helped to facilitate dialogue as we navigate together the colleges and universities of Northeast Florida, both the possibilities and the perils of AI in higher education. Following the event, we will gladly send a survey so that we can gather your feedback, not only about today's dialogue, but also about future conversations we might have as a Northeast Florida collaborative. And on behalf of Florida State College at Jacksonville, we thank you one and all for attending today's town hall.